Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming today to our CEU presentation of Supervising Gen Z Therapists, Normalizing Failure and Overcoming Challenges. My name is Justine Sherman. I am the CEO and Executive Director of Justine Sherman and Associates, which is a private speech-language pathology practice in Southern California. We see both children and adults, and we have 3 clinics in Claremont, Monrovia, and Camarillo, California, and we have remote therapists throughout the country as well. I've been a speech pathologist for 26 years, and majority of the time spent in private practice, and have had years and years of experience supervising, and noticed as we have taken on more Gen Z therapists within the clinic that our means of supervising and our processes needed to change. And that's how we came about creating this CEU. And with me, I have Bea Guerrero, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bea. I am a speech language pathologist here at Justine Sherman and Associates, and I'm also a supervisor. I am currently working towards a Master of Health Administration degree, and that has really allowed me to explore employee well-being and burnout as well. And I wanted to talk about how that relates to the Gen Z population and supervision. And so I just wanted to highlight employee well-being, right, in the context of working with Gen Z therapists and how we can continue to support that. So we're very excited to talk to you and walk you through these strategies.
So our focus this evening is on understanding how to supervise Generation Z speech language pathologists effectively. We only have 1 hour, so this will be a cursory explanation, but we hope it gives you how best to approach supervision of this generation. And we're going to explore generational characteristics, how these impact work dynamics, and how to normalize failure and challenges to foster resilient, confident clinicians. And this really is a timely and relevant topic given the influx of Gen Z into our profession. So supervising and mentoring Gen Z SLPs requires a unique approach that fosters resilience and professional growth and adaptability. This course explores strategies for supervisors to effectively support Gen Z clinicians by normalizing failure, addressing workplace challenges, and building a culture of learning and accountability. Participants will gain insight into generational characteristics, evidence-based supervision techniques, and practical tools to enhance communication, feedback delivery, and professional development. And by the end of this session, attendees will be equipped with actionable strategies to foster a supportive and growth-oriented work environment. So let's start with the big picture, why this matters. Supervising effectively isn't just about strong clinical skills. It's about understanding who we're supervising. And every generation brings different expectations and values and communication styles shaped by the world that they grew in. Gen Z is entering our field in big numbers now. And if we're still supervising based on what worked for us 15 or 20 years ago, we're going to miss the mark. So this isn't about labeling. It's about bridging gaps and building trust. When we understand generational differences and influences, we can tailor our support to meet the supervisee's needs and meet them where they are. And this presentation is about Gen Z as a whole. It's not meant to assume that all therapists that fall within this age range are the same. However, it's important that we acknowledge general trends in order to help us create better supervision environments. To supervise Gen Z therapists effectively, we need to understand their background and formative experiences. Who exactly we're talking about here? Let's see. Gen Z. They were born between 1997 and 2012, so the majority of our grad students, clinical fellows, and even some of our early career licensed SLPs fall into this group. And I want to spend some time really understanding who Gen Z is because these life experiences are shaping what we're seeing in the therapy room and in our supervisory relationships. So they are the first fully digital generation. Unlike previous generations who remember a time before internet, Gen Z has never known a world without smartphones and social media. They've always had immediate access to Google and YouTube and tutorials and answers at their fingertips. So that shapes how they learn and how they solve problems and how they expect to get information. And while that's really powerful, because they're resourceful and they're self-driven, it also means when they don't get immediate answers or feedback, they can feel stuck or even anxious. We have to remember that this generation is used to immediacy. That's not entitlement, that's just their norm. And let's talk about attention span. Studies have suggested that the constant notifications and the fast-paced media scrolling have reduced sustained attention span. So when we give lengthy lectures or multi-paragraph feedback emails, we might lose them. And it's not because they don't care, but it's because they're used to digesting information in short, focused bursts. So we may need to chunk our information or use visual supports more intentionally in supervision. Another key impact of the digital age is difficulty with live in-person conversations. We're seeing a lot of that. Many Gen Zers are more comfortable texting or sending a voice memo than engaging in spontaneous face-to-face discussions, especially when it involves conflict or correction or complex emotions. And that's not about immaturity. It's about the fact that a lot of their peer communication has happened online. So when we expect them to have quote unquote difficult conversations without modeling or scaffolding, they may feel unprepared. And as supervisors, that's our cue to teach those skills directly. How to ask for help, how to bring up concerns, and how to disagree respectfully in real time. One last thing with regard to being immersed in the digital age is social media. So this generation grew up with Instagram and TikTok, where everyone's life looks successful and polished and perfect. And that creates this massive pressure. They compare themselves constantly, not just personally, but professionally as well. So if they're not doing amazing therapy with perfect data and joyful kids every session, they might think they're failing. And that comparison culture affects how they see themselves as clinicians. And it's part of why so many fear failure and struggle with imposter syndrome. In addition to social media, we have major events that have shaped their worldview. Post 9/11 security fears, the economic instability of the Great Recession in 2008, COVID-19 isolating them during crucial learning periods. These events have left their mark. Many missed out on in-person learning or collaborative clinical training, so they may feel less confident in their professional identities. Plus, living through social unrest and political division means they often carry a high level of emotional awareness and sensitivity to equity and justice issues. Gen Z value mental health and work-life balance. And more than any other previous generation, Gen Z prioritizes mental well-being and workplace flexibility. They're more likely to speak out about being burned out or stress and job satisfaction. And they value how they learn and work and interact with authority figures, including their supervisors. So understanding these influences gives us a framework to be more empathetic, intentional, and effective as supervisors. Okay, let's take a moment to spotlight what Gen Z brings into our clinics, because it's not all challenges. There are actually a ton of strengths, and these are the kinds of traits we really need right now in our field. Gen Z is incredibly comfortable with technology. It's second nature to them. I've seen newer clinicians bring in apps that I've never heard of or create Google Forms for session feedback or pull out visuals or games mid-session with zero lag time. And it's not just convenient, it makes therapy more dynamic and accessible to their clients. And with teletherapy and EMR systems and digital tools being the norm now, this skill set is gold. They're also incredibly tuned in to inclusion and equity. Gen Z clinicians care deeply about doing things the right way, and not just ethically, but socially and culturally. And they ask smart questions about representation in therapy materials or challenge ableist language in reports. And that push can lead to some really positive change if we're willing to engage with it. You might notice that they ask for a lot of feedback. And that's not neediness, it's intentional. They want to improve, and they're often used to real-time feedback. Like, hello, we have social media. So that same expectation shows up in supervision. And I've found that when we provide frequent, actionable feedback, they respond quickly to it. It becomes this momentum building cycle. And this generation also values authenticity. They want to show up as their full selves, and they want you to, as a supervisor, do that as well. And that means they're often fantastic with clients who need extra emotional support. I mean, I've watched Gen Z clinicians build trust with kids who were previously shut down because they led with empathy and honesty. And finally, let's not forget the resilience and adaptability it takes to start your career during a pandemic. Many of these clinicians had remote practicums, they started their jobs online, and they navigated in an unstable healthcare environment from day one. They're still here. So that kind of flexibility and grit and the ability to pivot, I mean, that's a major asset to any team. So yes, there are learning curves with any generation, but Gen Z is showing up with a toolkit that we should absolutely be tapping into. And when we match their strengths with good mentorship and structured support, they really shine, and that lifts all of us up.
All right, so now let's take a look at some of the common challenges that come up when supervising Gen Z clinicians. So again, this is not about, stereotyping. These patterns come up across many new clinicians in this generation. And I think it's worth understanding them with empathy and curiosity. And so let's start with some discomfort around failure, right? And as a millennial, I can relate to this, honestly. Many Gen Z clinicians were raised in environments with structured systems and immediate feedback. So think, digital grade books, standardized tests, curated online identities. So failure hasn't always been framed as a learning opportunity. So when they encounter the real world messiness of therapy or hear constructive criticism, it can feel overwhelming or even personal. And I think that's where our role as supervisors becomes so critical. Modeling that growth comes from mistakes and that discomfort is part of learning. And I think another theme is the need for frequent validation. This often gets misread as being overly sensitive or insecure, but think about it. They grew up with likes, comments, immediate responses on social media. And so when they ask, was that okay? Or how did I do? It's often coming from a place of wanting to get it right, not just fishing for compliments. And we can harness this drive by giving regular, specific feedback and gradually building their internal confidence. And I think there's this challenge of hierarchy. Gen Z clinicians often value flat structures and collaboration over authority. They might be less comfortable with rigid, supervisor, supervisee dynamics and are more interested in mutual learning and respectful dialogue. And it's actually pretty refreshing if we think about it. But it also means that we need to be very clear about roles, boundaries, and expectations. Mutual respect doesn't necessarily mean the same thing as equal responsibility or experience. And I think we also can't ignore the mental health piece. Rates of anxiety and burnout are high among Gen Zs, and for good reason. They've inherited a world that feels incredibly unstable in so many ways. And as supervisors, we can support their well-being by normalizing rest, encouraging boundaries, and creating space for open conversations, especially about workload and stress. And lastly, digital communication is often their default, so they might prefer texting or emailing instead of picking up the phone or having tough conversations in person. And that doesn't mean they're avoidant. It's often just unfamiliar to them. And so part of the supervision is actually helping them build these face-to-face communication skills, especially for these clinical conversations with families, their team members, and also other professionals on the team. So bottom line, these aren't problems to fix. They're realities for us to navigate. And when we name them openly and approach them with empathy, we're able to build stronger, more effective supervision relationships that benefit everyone involved. And Justine, do you want to get us started on strategies for
Absolutely.
supervising Gen Z clinicians?
Sure. So we're going to dig deeper now into strategies that really work with Gen Z, and we're going to talk about how to create a learning environment where resilience and reflection and growth are expected and supported. So one of the most important things we can do for Gen Z clinicians is reframe failure. Gen Z's fear of failure is rooted in a few factors. One is perfectionism culture. So, as we've mentioned, they've been raised with this constant academic pressure and social comparison on social media and the quote unquote highlight reel effect. And many Gen Z individuals feel they have to always succeed visibly and immediately. They also have fear of public embarrassment. So digital life has made mistakes more permanent and more public. So a misstep feels broadcasted and harder to recover from. And then these high achieving environments. So they've grown up in competitive academic or extracurricular settings where failure felt like they were falling behind. They have this desire for stability as well. Again, coming of age during the economic uncertainty, a pandemic, a climate of anxiety, this generation often feels that failure will risk their already precarious sense of security. And lastly, the external validation loop. So growing up with likes and scores and external metrics as their defaults, sometimes they struggle to self-validate and instead equate failure with worthlessness. So it's our job as supervisors to normalize failure as part of growth. And here are some specific actionable ways a supervisor can help a team member embrace failure as natural and even essential part of learning and professional development. So number one is you as a supervisor need to tell your failure stories. Share a time you made a mistake as a therapist or a leader and what you learned from it. So it's modeling vulnerability. Number two is reframing the language around mistakes. Instead of asking what went wrong, ask what did you learn from that session or what would you do differently next time? And I want you to praise the process, not just the outcome. So highlight the effort and the creativity and the risk taking and the resilience, not just the client progress or the productivity. When you give feedback, like, I really appreciate how you tried a new approach there with that client, even if it didn't go how you planned. That kind of initiative is key to becoming a great clinician. So you see, it's more about the process than the result. And normalize feedback as support, not criticism. If you position feedback sessions as collaborative growth opportunities, not performance judgments, that's going to be key to them accepting the feedback. And use a warm, curious tone and invite self-reflection. So what do you think worked well? Or what would you want support with next time? And then celebrate recoveries. So when someone makes a mistake and corrects it, publicly and positively acknowledge that effort. So I want to call out how thoughtfully Bea responded to that parent concern. Things got bumpy, but she regrouped. She handled it beautifully. Way to go. And that can be done at a staff meeting. That can be done in small group huddles. That can be an email sent out to the team. That public acknowledgement will go a long way. And create psychological safety. And we're going to get to that on the next slide. That's a whole slide on its own. Lastly, make failure a team norm. So encourage your team to document and share maybe lessons learned. And you can title that. So that could be from a therapeutic side, from an administrative side. They could talk about the challenges, and maybe that's done during supervision meetings. Or you could host quarterly growth roundtables. So where the clinicians get to discuss cases, maybe that didn't go perfectly, but that they are carrying forward and they can discuss what they learned. Additionally, as supervisors, we can embrace and model a growth mindset, which is the belief that our abilities and intelligence can be developed through dedication and hard work. A growth mindset emphasizes effort and persistence and learning from feedback, and it encourages the supervisees to view challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles to avoid. And it encourages them to seek solutions and strategies when they're faced with these setbacks. And it also teaches them to appreciate feedback and failure as tools for improvement. So by embedding growth mindset language into your supervision, we create a safe, supportive space where Gen Z SLPs can feel empowered to take risks, to learn from their missteps, and build confidence over time. And I highly recommend reading Mindset by Carol Dweck to learn more about fixed mindset and growth mindset. And this is my very beat up copy of it, and it's an excellent book.
All right. I love that you mentioned about creating safe and supportive spaces for Gen Z SLP. So we're going to talk about fostering psychological safety. So we need to create a culture where missteps are expected, processed, and used to grow. And it starts with psychological safety. But what is psychological safety? In the work environment, it is the belief that you won't face punishment or humiliation for sharing ideas, asking questions, expressing concerns, or making mistakes. And in a team setting, psychological safety means that members feel confident that their contributions, whether it's a bold idea, a challenging thought, a request for feedback, it won't result in embarrassment, rejection, or backlash. And psychological safety in the workplace isn't about everyone being kind. It's more about creating that environment where individuals feel encouraged to think aloud, share their incomplete thoughts, challenge norms, give and receive feedback, and resolve conflicts together. And I think in these environments, supervisors prioritize openness and transparency, as well as truthfulness, while teammates support each other through these exchanges. And so when psychological safety is established in the workplace, individuals feel empowered to bring their true selves to work, willing to take risks and express vulnerabilities. And organizations that promote this kind of culture, where employees are free to ask difficult questions, voice concerns, seek help, and take calculated risks, we see them thriving. And so in a research study conducted by the Center for Creative Leadership, which involved around 300 leaders over a period of 2.5 years, it was revealed that teams with higher levels of psychological safety experience better performance and less interpersonal conflict. And as a supervisor of a Gen Z speech language pathologist, creating an environment of psychological safety is crucial. So Gen Z employees value, remember from the previous slides, transparency, authenticity, and feedback, and they want to feel comfortable expressing themselves without fear of judgment or reprimand. And to foster psychological safety with your Gen Z supervisee, here are some ways to approach it. So first, encouraging open communication. Let your supervisee know that it's safe to share ideas, questions, or concerns, no matter how small or unfinished they may seem. Gen Zs thrive in environments where they can brainstorm freely and explore new ideas without, being pressured into perfection. And so by actively inviting their input and making it clear that their thoughts are valued, you actually build trust. And the second one is embracing constructive disagreement. Gen Zs are known for questioning the status quo and seeking to improve processes. And as a supervisor, encourage this by creating space for respectful challenge. Let your supervisee know that it's okay to disagree or offer alternative perspectives. And I think also this helps them feel empowered to voice their thoughts and contribute to the development of the team, and as well as client-centered approaches. The third one is modeling vulnerability and feedback. So it's important as a supervisor to demonstrate openness to feedback and self-reflection. Gen Z values leaders who are not only receptive to input, but also willing to admit mistakes. And I think it's helpful to share your own growth experiences and ask for feedback on your supervision style. This reinforces a culture of mutual respect and continuous improvement. The fourth one is providing regular and honest feedback. Gen Z employees appreciate clear, constructive feedback that helps them grow professionally. So make sure your feedback is specific and actionable rather than vague praise or criticism. Creating regular opportunities for check-ins also ensure that they understand where they're excelling and where they can improve. Number 5 is supporting risk-taking and innovation. Gen Z is more willing to take calculated risks, especially in innovative settings like our field, speech therapy. By supporting their efforts to experiment with new approaches or trying different therapeutic techniques, they know that making mistakes is part of the learning process. So celebrate their creativity and encourage them to push their boundaries. And the next one is maintaining a collaborative atmosphere. So it's important for us to know that collaboration is key for Gen Z. They appreciate being part of a team that works together, shares knowledge, and learns from one another. So foster an environment where your supervisee feels like they're contributing to the collective success of the team and not just their individual performance. And lastly, create a safe space for vulnerability. Gen Z tends to value authenticity and emotional well-being. So be mindful of creating a supportive and non-judgmental space where your supervisee feels comfortable sharing challenges or personal concerns that could impact their work. Acknowledge their feelings and also provide guidance without making them feel exposed or judged. And so when supervisors model psychological safety, Gen Z SLPs will be more likely to thrive in a dynamic and open work environment. They'll feel motivated to bring their authentic selves to their practice, leading to better outcomes for their clients and increased professional growth.
Our third strategy focuses on building accountability and confidence. So why do many Gen Z SLPs lack accountability and confidence, and why does it matter to us as supervisors? Well, we're back to number 1, perfectionism and fear of failure. This is our theme here. As we previously mentioned, many Gen Z supervisees grew up in that achievement-oriented environments, and they're used to excelling in structured systems, and they fear making mistakes in the real world because it's ambiguous. Number 2 is limited experience with autonomy. And this is something that really was an aha moment for me when I was doing my research. Due to helicopter parenting, over accommodation in school settings, or limited pre-professional opportunities, some Gen Z clinicians may not have had the chance to truly own their tasks or decisions. And therefore, they haven't ever practiced self-accountability. Number 3 is a high feedback dependence. So Gen Z is accustomed to that immediate feedback that we talked about, the likes, the comments, the test scores immediately being sent to their iPads. In a clinical setting where feedback may be delayed or nuanced or informal, they may flounder or misread their performance. And then we have imposter syndrome. They are often very self-aware and compare themselves harshly to others. Again, thanks to social media. And this can lead to second guessing their skills and hesitating to take initiative. So, why, as supervisors, do we have to prioritize building accountability and confidence? Well, number one, client outcomes depend on it. Clinicians need the confidence to make decisions in the moment and follow through with their responsibilities, especially with vulnerable populations. We also have workplace culture and team dynamics. And without accountability, others may take on extra burdens. Without confidence, Gen Z team members may disengage or withdraw or burn out. And then there's long-term professional growth. So confidence and accountability are foundations for leadership, advocacy, and career sustainability. And as supervisors, we're developing the future here. We're developing future mentors, advocates, and leaders in our field. So here are some specific strategies to implement. Number one is co-creating expectations and goals. At the beginning of supervision, involve the supervisee in setting weekly, monthly goals. Use a shared doc or a goal tracking system like Notion or Google Sheets. An example would be like asking them, what's one area you want to improve on this month? And let's break it into weekly steps together. And it's something you can return to during your weekly meetings and have them accountable for their growth. You can also use visual tasks and progress trackers. So Gen Z thrives with clarity and visibility. So creating visual tools to track progress, there are things like Trello boards or simple checklists. They can self-monitor and keep it collaborative and low pressure, maybe like color coding it by client goals or documentation or professional development. Visual progress equals motivation and clarity. So let them update it to increase their investment. There's a book we as supervisors read, and it talks about the scoreboard. When you see what the goals are and how you're doing, it makes the game or the job much more interesting and engaging. And then scaffolding clinical responsibilities. Begin with modeling, then move to co-treatment, and then observation. So you can make the progression transparent. So this week, I'll handle the intake. Next week, you're going to do it with my guidance. And then the following week, you'll do it on your own and I'll observe. You're adjusting the scaffold based on their strengths and reflection of their skills. And then number four is using Socratic questioning to build clinical reasoning. And this is something all of the supervisees at Justine Sherman and Associates have learned to do, is using the Socratic method. So rather than telling them what to do, ask the questions that guide them to reflect and problem solve on their own. So some prompts would be, what made you choose that prompt in the session? Or what do you think would have happened if you tried a different approach? Or how do you think that strategy supported the client's goals? This helps the Gen Z clinicians feel like collaborators and not just learners. And then they begin to connect with their actions and with the outcomes, and they develop confidence in decision making. And lastly is reframing failure as feedback and highlighting resilience. So normalizing missteps. Tell your stories of your own growth through struggling through different moments. And when something goes wrong, guide them to reflect. Like, what can this teach us about flexibility or planning? And then praise those bounce back moments. You handled that unexpected parent concern with grace. That shows resilience and professionalism. Way to go. So those are all strategies in order to build accountability and confidence. Bea, why don't you do number 4?
Sure. All right. So for our fourth strategy, it is through providing consistent feedback and validation. And so Gen Z clinicians crave feedback. They've grown up with constant input through digital platforms and academic performance systems. And without it, they may feel uncertain or assume that they're failing. And they often tie self-worth to performance. So constructive, balanced feedback helps them decouple identity from outcomes and also build resilience. It's important to remember that validation isn't just about praise. It's about feeling seen and supported. And Gen Z values psychological safety, which I talked about earlier, especially in a new or high stakes kind of work setting. So here are some tangible strategies for supervisors. So, number one, ask them how they prefer feedback. Some Gen Z supervisees may want written notes, others prefer in-person dialogue. Clarify early to tailor your approach. The second one is provide daily or weekly microfeedback. Instead of waiting for formal check-ins, offer short, specific feedback in the moment. Like, for example, you did a nice job explaining that to the parent. You simplified it well without losing the meaning. Third, use a structured reflection template. Give supervisees a tool to self-assess and prepare for feedback, such as questions like, what worked well? Or what didn't go as planned? Or what's one thing you would like to try next time? Review it together in supervision, because this fosters accountability and confidence simultaneously. The next one is validating effort before outcome. Acknowledge the work, not just the result. So, for example, it might sound like you really prepared for that parent meeting. Even though it was challenging, your professionalism stood out. Next is using strengths-based language. Start feedback with strengths before offering suggestions. Use language like, I noticed your ability to, or you showed growth in this area, or I appreciated how you approached talking to that parent. Um, Another one would be balancing validation with accountability. So avoid only offering praise. Genuine feedback delivered with respect helps Gen Z supervisees grow and trust your guidance. And lastly is creating routine check-ins, which we talked about earlier, to offer praise, correction, and direction.
Gen Zs grew up in a collaborative learning environment and they prefer a coach over a boss. They want leaders who walk alongside them, not over them. So, our next strategy is creating alternative mentorship models. We said they value authenticity, transparency, and approachability. Formal titles and rigid power dynamics can feel alienating and stifle their communication. Hierarchical models may trigger imposter syndrome or fear of judgment, leading to withdrawal rather than growth. So, how do we adapt mentorship for Gen Zers then? Well, number one is positioning yourself as a collaborator. So, framing supervision as a partnership. We're building your clinical independence together. Let's problem solve this as a team. I want you to share your own clinical challenges again. Tell them about your mistakes, model humility, and normalize the learning curve for them. Number two is using collaborative coaching models. So again, asking open-ended Socratic style questions like, what do you think the client needed in that moment? Or how might you shift that activity next time to support more initiation? And guide them towards self-discovery instead of just giving them the answers. Also, encourage peer mentorship. Pair newer supervisees with peers for co-observations or co-planning sessions or reflection chats. Consider starting maybe a peer circle where supervisees share their wins and challenges and strategies informally. At JSA, we host weekly small group huddles to do just that. Also, normalize reverse mentorship. So acknowledge their tech savviness, social awareness, new ideas, and ask for their input on evolving approaches or client engagement. Like, you're great with digital tools. Do you think we could build a resource around that for other team members? Also, creating shared learning opportunities. So invite Gen Z supervisees to co-lead in services or write content or help develop materials. This builds agency and investment in the company. And lastly, check your tone and delivery. So use language that empowers, not commands. Avoid overly formal or authoritative tones unnecessarily, and make sure that we're using tones that are necessary for clarity or compliance. And those are all strategies for creating that alternative mentorship model.
All right, we're moving on to recognizing and preventing burnout. And so we're familiar, right, with mental health challenges, including anxiety and burnout. They're on the rise across the speech pathology field. And also our Gen Zers are feeling it most acutely. This generation is navigating a world marked by uncertainty, rapid change, and high expectations on top of our workload. Interestingly, in 2023, an APA study reported that Gen Zs tend to have the highest stress levels compared to other generations. And healthcare workers tend to be most impacted by burnout, with 46% reporting burnout in 2023. So that's according to CDC data. And we've also looked at several studies that show that SLPs are prone to experiencing burnout. So what is burnout? Burnout is a psychological syndrome and now considered as an occupational phenomenon by the World Health Organization. And it encompasses three dimensions. The first one is emotional exhaustion. So the individual feels overloaded and depleted emotionally. The second one is depersonalization, where the individual shows a negative response to other people in a cynical way. And the third one is a decreased sense of personal accomplishment. So they tend to feel negatively towards their own work, and they feel insufficient regarding their ability to perform their job. And the risks are higher when they don't have growth opportunities and a lack of professional autonomy. And so, how do we recognize burnout and prevent burnout in the workplace, especially among our supervisees? The first one is creating opportunities for open discussion. And this can be incorporated in your meetings, your weekly meetings, and huddles. In these one-on-one meetings, create that opportunity to have an open discussion and just check in how they're feeling during performance reviews, during observations, and also you can administer surveys such as the Maslack Burnout Inventory, or we have one that's tailor-fitted to speech pathologists. It's called the Speech Language Pathologist Stress Inventory. The other way we can prevent burnout is to actually foster citizenship and belongingness. But what is citizenship? It's voluntary behaviors that employees engage in to support the organization and its goals. And we see citizenship exhibited by employees who are satisfied in their jobs and they become essentially citizens of their organization. It includes three levels. The first level is them understanding or asking the question, what is in it for me? Or is this worth it for me? That then the next level of engagement or citizenship works on understanding the structure of the organization, the rules and the customs. And the third level is accepting and embracing their duties, especially in belonging in a supervisee-supervisor relationship. And supervisors should place a lot of value on citizenship and belongingness because it really creates that internal motivation and engagement. The next one is creating a culture of well-being. Safety, innovation, and openness. So if it's integrated into the supervisor-supervisee relationship, supervisees feel that they are valued, they are nurtured, supported, and encouraged. They feel safe, comfortable, and respected, as well as included in that relationship. And then because of that, they feel like they can contribute meaningful work within their team. And eventually they develop and grow their careers as individuals as well as team members. And the last one is influencing through leadership. There are some studies that report that leadership qualities are actually related to burnout and job satisfaction. And so when a supervisee is engaged because of the supervisor's leadership style, we can see a lot of potential to grow and work towards a shared vision. So this is built by, creating that strong relationship between the supervisor and the supervisee. And through leading by example, we encourage engagement, we encourage openness and innovation. And together you can work towards a shared vision with your supervisee. And those are all strategies to recognizing and preventing burnout.
And then our next one is embracing in-person communication. So Gen Z supervisees, like we mentioned, prefer texting. They prefer messaging apps over email, and they like the email, all of these over spontaneous face-to-face interactions. And they may experience anxiety or discomfort during traditional feedback models, especially when the feedback is critical, and that's that they're receiving or that they're giving. This is often misinterpreted as avoidance or defensiveness. And when in reality, it's just simple, they simply process differently. So while Gen Z often prefer the digital communication, it's crucial that they build confidence in real-time, face-to-face communication, especially when interacting with clients and caregivers. Clinical care is relational, and our supervisees must learn to navigate sensitive conversations with empathy and clarity and professionalism, and it has to be in the moment. So, as supervisors, our goal is to bridge the gap between their communication comfort zone and the relational learning that happens best in person. So, the way we do that, number one is acknowledging and normalizing their digital preference. So, we can start by validating their comfort, their level of comfort with asynchronous communication. So, we could say to them, it makes sense that texting or writing feels more natural because you've grown up with that. But in this profession, we also need to build your skills in talking through challenges in real time. This softens the resistance and opens the door for coaching. Number two is layering written and verbal feedback. So if we provide written notes to reduce the feeling of being overwhelmed before in-person feedback, we're going to get through to our supervisees more effectively. So if we can say to them, I emailed you my notes so that you can look over them in advance, and then we're going to debrief about them in person tomorrow. So you're giving them the chance to digest the information visually, and then you can have the conversation. And you can model this approach as something they can also use with their families. You could say, you can jot down your key talking points before a parent meeting. It'll help you organize your thoughts, make you feel more confident going in, and then you can have that face-to-face conversation. Keeping verbal feedback efficient and consistent is also important. So using brief, predictable check-ins. Gen Z values structure and efficiency. So if we said, let's check in every Thursday for 10 minutes, and we're just going to touch base on how things are going and what support you need. So they can expect it to happen, and you have to make sure that you put it on your calendar and that you are consistent with that. But then it's not an overwhelming meeting. It's brief, consistent feedback, like we talked about with the micro feedback. Also using digital tools to support learning and not replace the connection. So you could try shared docs, feedback journals, or video reviews. And then emphasizing the importance of real-time client-family communication. So I want you to be direct as a supervisor and really explain it's our responsibility as SLPs to communicate clearly and professionally with caregivers and clients, especially when we're addressing progress or concerns or goals or attendance. These are not conversations that should be delayed or done via email. And you can role play with them about how to respond when a parent asks about lack of progress or expresses worries. And you can practice that both with affirming and corrective messages. And help supervisees script their language if needed, and then fade that support over time. So a tip here is to model how to deliver the feedback with warmth and clarity, then invite them to reflect on that. So what did you notice about how I handled that caregiver's conversation or concern? Or what would you have said? And let's talk it through. So give them the opportunity to listen to you, take in how you did it, and then to do it on their own. This dual approach of respecting their preferences while also preparing them for clinical expectations that we have will help help your Gen Z supervisees grow into confident, competent communicators. And that's very valuable. So, wrapping up, let's bring everything together here by revisiting the core needs we're seeing in Gen Z supervisees and how we as supervisors can meet those needs with empathy, structure, and clarity. Number one was that discomfort with failure or ambiguity. Remember, we're going to normalize failure as part of our clinical growth. We're going to model vulnerability. We're going to use Socratic questioning and celebrate productive struggle. We're going to help supervisees understand that unclear situations are where professional reasoning and growth happen. It is not something to avoid. We could say to them, let's figure this out together. And that phrase goes a long way toward lowering their stress levels and building their trust with you as a supervisor. The second one is that need for frequent validation. Offer timely, specific praise tied to effort, progress, or clinical judgment, not just the outcomes. Reinforce their identity as capable professionals in training and help them internalize your feedback as evidence that they're growing. Maybe something like you handled that redirection really well. It was clear but warm, and that's exactly what we're aiming for. Number three was difficulty tolerating traditional hierarchies. So embrace collaborative supervision. Even if you've never done it before as a supervisor, let them be part of the decision-making, goal setting, and clinical brainstorming. Build mentorship networks, not just top-down directives. Peer support groups, shared learning experiences, all of those will reduce intimidation and increase accountability. Maybe you could try like, here's the framework. What's your take on that? Or that will open up the space for them to offer their opinion while still you guiding them. And then we talked about that high level of anxiety and burnout. So again, prioritizing psychological safety and modeling boundaries. Keep check-ins consistent and supportive. Encourage those micro wins, breaks, and reflections on successes, and be proactive about helping them notice when they're doing something well. And create the space for them to say, I'm struggling, I'm vulnerable, and know they're not going to be judged for it. And then we have that preference for digital communication over face-to-face feedback. Balance digital ease with real-time interpersonal skills building, especially for caregivers and team interactions. And provide written follow-ups to reinforce verbal feedback and practice those difficult conversations in supervision before they have to happen with the client or the parent. These digital tools can extend support, but they can't replace clinical presence, so you have to teach both of them. So final words here. Gen Z supervisees bring curiosity and digital fluency and a hunger to grow, but they need supervisors who can offer them flexibility without lowering expectations. So please, I want you to hear that. I know we're saying we need to change how we're approaching supervision, but that doesn't mean that we are moving the goalposts and that we're lowering our expectations. We're just presenting our expectations in a different manner. So we want to lower the expectations without the rigidity. And then supporting Gen Z isn't about coddling them. It's about meeting them where they are and mentoring them into who they can become. So Bea and I hope that you were able to take some real tangible strategies from today's CEU and use them to empower your supervisees, to grow your teams, and to do what we're here to do, which is take care of our clients and our families. We thank you so much for your time. And if you have any questions, you can always email us at Justine Sherman SLP. And Bea?
It's Anna. It's also my first name. It's Anna, ANNAG, at JustineShermanSLP.com.
Thank you and have a great day, everyone.